Welcome dear students to the second lecture of strategic evaluation and control. In the last lecture we had discussed about the types of strategy evaluation and control. Now in this lecture we will move further in this and we will talk about the tools and techniques of strategic control and evaluation. Now these tools and techniques can be broadly classified into two categories. If you remember, we have talked about the types of strategic control and there were 4 types of strategic control: premise control, implementation controls, special alert control and surveillance control, strategic surveillance control. These were the types. Now we are moving to, as I said, the techniques. So, they can be classified into 2 categories. The first is the strategic momentum control and the second which we will discuss after a little while is strategic leap control. So, let us take a look at the strategic momentum control. Now, as you can see from the word itself, momentum means that you have to maintain a particular level of activity and you have to ensure that that level of activity continues and you with little progressions you start moving ahead and forward. So, these techniques are aimed at assuring that the assumptions on whose basis strategies were formulated are still valid and finding out what needs to be done in order to allow the organization to maintain its existing strategic momentum. So, again as I referred to you about the 4 types of strategic control, the first was premise control, and here in strategic momentum control we are basically talking about the assumptions only or the premises on which the strategies are formulated, and here we are trying to assure or we are trying to make sure that the assumptions still hold good and what needs to be done in case there are little changes in the assumption, what do we need to do so that the organization does not lose its current level of activity. And the second is strategic leap control. Leap, as you know and you can understand from the word itself, leap is taking a big step ahead. So, here we are not talking about little advances, we are talking about a big step ahead. So, strategic leap control, this control can assist organizations by helping to define the new strategic requirements and cope with emerging environmental realities. So, this type of control will help the organization to determine that in the future what needs to be done, what you should do in order that your level of activity improves in the due course of time. So, that is what we are talking about in strategic leap control and how it will cope up with the emerging environmental realities. Now, in detail, if we talk about strategic momentum control, it includes the following techniques. The first is responsibility control centers. The first technique in strategic momentum control is responsibility control center. Now, from the very word responsibility, you can understand that it talks about a level of commitment, a level of accountability. So, a responsibility center is an organizational subsystem. It can be a particular department, a particular unit in the organization which is charged with a well defined mission and headed by a manager who is accountable for the performance of the center. So, how will we define a responsibility center? Any unit or a subsystem which has a well defined mission. It has a mission of its own. Of course, it will be guided by the organizational mission, but it has a mission of its own and it is headed by a manager who is accountable for its performance. And what are responsibility centers? They are like the building blocks for management control, because how do you exercise a control? The organization is big, so many units, so many departments, so many products. So, if you divide all of them into responsibility centers, then it is very easy to exercise monitoring and control on them. and there are 4 major types of responsibility centers. The first is cost center. Cost centers, as the very name suggests, a center in which manager is held responsible for controlling cost of inputs. Now, if in a particular unit or in a particular department, the focus is on reducing the cost, right. So, whatever initiatives are required, whatever plans are required will be formulated in such a way that cost or the cost is kept under control, the resources are optimized or maximized. So, the entire control and monitoring of this department will be done on the basis of how much cost is being incurred in this department. Second responsibility center is revenue center. Revenue, that is the returns which this particular unit is generating, which this particular subsystem is generating. A center whose budgetary performance is measured primarily by its ability to generate a specified level of revenue. So, there's it is very common in organizations. There are certain targets which are set, and the teams or that particular department or unit is asked to achieve that target in terms of revenue, and if they are able to achieve, that means the strategy is successful. Otherwise, in the next time we have to determine what went wrong in the strategy, or what was it, the strategy was fine, there was some problem in the implementation. Wherever the problem was, we have to take a corrective action when we are using the strategy the next time. Then the third is the profit center. Then you have talked about cost, we have talked about revenue. So, whatever revenue we get after deducting the cost, we get the profit. A center whose performance is measured by the difference between the revenue and cost. So, as I told you in the last session also, say for example, if a unit is earning lot of revenue, but at the same time it is incurring a lot of cost also. So, then that will not be a very good profit center. If you remember, in the BCG matrix we talked about stars. Stars are companies which are their cash flow is also high, they are the highest cash generators, but because they belong to an industry which is growing industry, so a lot of activity takes place and lot of money is also pumped into the stars. So, that is why we will not when we see the difference between the cost and the cash or the revenue we are getting from these companies, the difference will not be very high. But in comparison to them, cash cows will be companies which will not be taking up much of cost, they will not be incurring much of expenditure because they belong to a mature industry. But on the other hand, because their market share is very high, they are earning lots of revenue. So, that is why, because cost is low, revenue is high, profits are very, very high. So, all that profit is pumped into maintaining stars and thinking about what do we need to, in which question marks we have to invest. And then the last is investment center, a responsibility center whose performance is based on return on investment. So, if we have let us say taken a machine and we have invested a machine, or we have invested in a land or anything of that sort, what are the returns we are getting from there? Whatever money we spent, because the money has generated so much of value from that investment that is increasing, right. The investment we have done has increased in terms of the value of money, right. So, that is an investment center. Now, the second technique in strategic momentum control is underlying success factors. For a company, it is very, very important to know that what are those factors which are its key success factors. There can be so many factors which can determine the success of a company. When we talk in terms of marketing, then we talk about the marketing mix, right? When we talk in terms of HR, then we say good processes of recruitment, selection, training, compensation. This can determine success. Then if we talk in terms of production, then we say, if you are optimizing the resources, if you are scheduling in a proper way, all these things, or if you are going for good quality controls, then that can be a success factor. But what are the key success factors? What are those special factors which are very rare to find in other companies, and which are those factors which keep this company ahead of its competitors? So, we have to again and again look for our key success factors, and we have to find out how as a company we are doing on those key success factors. We are taking an general look at the overall organizations in the earlier method, wherein we had certain centers, but here we are looking at those factors which will sail us through in the long run. So, and these factors are most important and unavoidable. If you do not work on these factors, if you do not focus on these factors, then you will not be able to achieve the goals which you have set for yourself. So, for example, a key success factor for Apple would be R&D, research and development. So, if Apple misses out on R&D, what will happen? It will be a failure, it might be a failure in the market, because what do people expect from Apple? Innovative features. It is supposed to be a market leader in innovation in terms of these smartphones or tablets or all these things. So, this would be a key success factor, and hence Apple, till the time it focuses, and if it sees for itself, it analyzes for itself and sees how well it is doing on this key success factor, then only in the long run it can sustain itself. It is not a one time activity, it is a long term sustained effort, because these are the most important and unavoidable factors. So, if you have heard of this company called Zara, Zara, the name of the company, it is an Italian company which is into fashion garments, and it is a fast fashion garments company, and it also sells accessories also. What do we mean by fast fashion? Zara is very quick to understand what can be the probable changes in the customer's preference, what can be the probable changes in the markets, right? It is type of a, if you recollect from the last session, it is a type of a feed forward or a proactive control, or we can also say that it is also a type of a surveillance, strategic surveillance, which they keep on. They do not wait for others to come up or the competitors to come up. Their underlying success factor is that they are able to anticipate, and the beauty is that their stores are replenished with new stuff and new designs twice a week. Can you imagine, in a garment retailer store, within a week twice you get new stock. After even 15-20 days of visiting a garment retailer, you feel that the stuff is same. It's only after a month or so that the new stuff arrives, still the old stuff is there. But the beauty of Zara is that there are new deliveries twice a week, because they have their own designers, they have their own manufacturers, they have a very close control on their supply chain, because their underlying success factor is how quick they are able to, how agile they are in understanding the preferences or the changes in the fashion trends and supplying garments, supplying clothes accordingly, right. So, it from the time the cloth is designed by the designer, from that time it takes 10 to 15 days for the garment to reach the Zara outlet. Don't you think it is remarkable? Because even if you give for stitching your clothes to a tailor or a boutique, it takes good 20 days for them, minimum 20, sometimes it would take a month or so for them to stitch and return the stitched product to you. And a company which is manufacturing in bulk, from designing to delivering, it is taking 10 to 15 days, and that is why it stays ahead of its competition. So, if it misses out on its underlying success factor, and if it takes 1 month time, or it is not able to understand what are the changes going in the market, it will it will be left behind in the race of competition. Then there are this generic strategies approach. Generic strategies approach is very simple. It works on the postulation that strategies followed by similar organizations are comparable to each other because they are competitive. So, all companies in the pharmaceutical sector, their strategies can be compared with each other, and we can see that which is doing better than the other, which is giving better results than the other. So, we can evaluate our own strategies in terms of the strategies of our competitors, because we are in the similar type of industry. So, it is a logic of general to particular and particular to general. General to particular, that means because everybody is in the same boat. So, everybody's strategy can be everybody's strategy in the pharmaceutical company, all companies are following the same strategy. So, a new company can also, and any other company in the pharma industry can follow that strategy. And on the other hand, it talks about particular to general, that is that if a specific company is following a particular strategy, then it can be followed by other companies, or it can be compared by the strategies of other companies also. Next, the second type of strategic technique of strategic evaluation and control is strategic leap control. Now, this includes the following techniques. The first is strategic issue control. Now, strategic issue control, it aims to identify one or more strategic issues and assessing their impact on the organization. Now, it tries to find out that what impact a particular situation or a particular issue can have on the organization. Libel identifies 4 functions of a strategic issue management system, that if you are trying to control through the strategic issue management, then what are the 4 information or the 4 dimensions on which you need to work on. The first is early detection of trends and issues in the environment. Any change or any trend which is going to impact your business, your strategy, you should be the early ones, you should be the company which is able to identify, to find it out first, or at least the first few in your industry. Then understanding the discontinuities which are imminent because of the trends and issues. Second thing, I have identified what can be the probable changes. Now, I have to also understand that what can be the discontinuities. Discontinuities means like whatever we are doing currently, whatever way we are moving ahead currently, where we are required to stop or where we are required to change. So, there is a continuous process and there is a discontinuity when you stop that continuous process. So, we have to understand with what points in the organization we need to continue, and in what points of organization because of these changes in trends and issues where we need to change in according to these issues. Next is assessment of the resulting strategic implications. Now, we have to assess that when these trends will affect us, what will be the implication, the long term result or the long term outcome of these issues or trends. And then obviously, whatever you determine as a result of that, whatever conclusions you draw out of it, you have to take measures or actions so that whatever issues the company may face or whatever trends you see are not able to negatively impact our performance, right. Long ago, several years ago, there was this crisis which Johnson and Johnson faced. I am sure many of you may be knowing about it. It is a very famous crisis or an issue which Johnson and Johnson faced, and you know this company very well. It is a very famous company. Now they were selling this tablet Tylenol, which is a painkiller, and it was a very popular medicine, and it was an over the counter drug. And people were, they had a lot of faith in this Tylenol. And what happened that certain people, which still the company does not know who those people are, but somehow they tampered with the packing of the tablet and how they managed it, but they laced it or they coated it with cyanide. Cyanide, is a very dangerous poison. So they laced it with cyanide, repackaged it, and they put it on the shelves in the various the medicine stores and the convenience stores where Tylenol was sold. Now, as a result of this, obviously many people fell ill and 7 people died also after consuming Tylenol. Now, when this was a very big issue, very negative and damaging the company's reputation. And the first call which the company received was from some media house. Obviously, media people are the first, you have seen in so many cases, media people are the first to reach the situation. And Johnson and Johnson, when the media person called them to to tell them about the situation and what has happened and was asking several questions from them, Johnson and Johnson did not have that much of information about the situation. More than them, the media people had the information, as it happens in these cases. But from that moment itself, Johnson and Johnson came into action. They realized that it is a very difficult and a crisis situation, and they need to take swift actions. There has been a change in the situation, there has certain issues have cropped up, and there is a crisis at hand. So immediately, without any explanations, without any excuses, first they from the wherever they got complaints, from those medicine shops, from those pharmacies and from those convenience stores, they called back their medicines. And then fearing and doubting that they were not sure that how many packages have been affected by it. So they recalled each and every tablet of Tylenol from the market without ever thinking about the losses the company may have to incur, because all of them may not have been because of they laced with cyanide, but they did not want to take a chance with their reputation and with their credibility with people, and for every step they were in communication with the customer. They made the customer realize that it is not their fault, it is some people who are malicious in nature who have done this to run down its reputation. And after a lot of research and development, they brought about new packaging of Tylenol, which was a 3-seal packaging, and they made the customer understand that this is a packaging which cannot be tampered with, and it cannot be now it cannot be, nobody can do anything with the medicine. And hence with that thing, they again came to the market and they sold the tablets to the customer. And because they handled the issue in such a nice way and such a proactive way, in the sense that once they came to know about the thing, before other incidents happened, they recalled all the tablets back and they were able to set up a credibility in the market. Then the second technique in strategic leap control is strategic field analysis. It is a way of examining the nature and extent of synergies that exist or are lacking between the components of an organization. Synergy is very, very important across the departments. You know, there's marketing, there's HR, there's finance, there's production, there's R&D. Now, for example, R&D comes with innovative feature in the product. The production says, oh, this is not, I mean, we will not be able to incorporate this. Even if we incorporate, it will be after 3 months. It can't be done right now. What will happen? In the meantime, someone else will come with that innovation, right? So, there has to be synergies, they have to work in close correlation with each other, otherwise because the overall strategy of the organization will fail. Similarly, you know, the marketing department, the sales department of an organization, you know, if it is a, let's say they are selling cars, the sales will try to pitch to a customer, and if the customer says that I don't have the money to buy, they will say we will get it financed from our own company. And everything is done, everything is set. Now, when they send the papers to the loan disbursement department, they will look at the papers and say this customer is not eligible for this much of loan. Now, what will happen? The marketing, the sales people will feel that the loan disbursement department is trying to create a hurdle in the achievement of their targets, and the loan disbursement department will always feel that the sales people are only worried about their target, they are not concerned about the credit worthiness of the customer, and when the customer fails to repay the EMIs, then it becomes a bad debt for the company incurs losses, but they are not bothered, they are only concerned about their own targets. So, that becomes a loss for the organization when people are not in synergy with each other. So, that is there, because in order to achieve a strategy, only a good strategy or a plan and allocation of resources is not merely important, teamwork is also very, very important. Then system modeling, it is like a simulation, computer based models are used that you know, kind of create an artificial environment which is actually a replica of the real environment, so that we are able to understand how the strategies will work in that. And the last is scenarios. Scenario is like what will be the future situation, the perception about the likely environment a firm would face in the future. Scenario planning is identifying a specific set of uncertainties, different realities of what might happen in the future of your business, because it is very important to also predict what is going to happen. So, on the basis of the past trends, the current scenario, one has to kind of try to foresee what is going to happen in the future, otherwise our strategies might fail. So, one has to keep a tab on that, and that is what we keep, otherwise the organization cannot leap forward. So, that is why scenarios is also a very important technique of strategy evaluation and control. So, students, these were the techniques of strategic evaluation and control. I hope you have understood them. Thank you so much.